This video explains how to assemble the CoroFlake. To assemble your CoroFlake, you will need several tools to complete your project. The first is a regular utility knife. It needs to have a good sharp blade. That's very important. You'll need a pair of pliers for removing the staples from the shipping box. Very important, you will need a Coro claw. This is used to cut just parts of the Coro. Technically you could use a utility knife, but I highly recommend the Coro claw. It's much safer and it's much quicker. You'll need a pencil or a pen for tracing the outline. You'll need a tape measure or a ruler. You'll need hot glue. We have found that this AdTech 24 to a pack glue sticks, which are UV resistant, have worked out very well. If you're going to be using your own glue sticks, be sure to do some testing to make sure that they adhere well to the CoroPlast with some samples. Of course, you'll need a glue gun. This is a very nice glue gun, but any kind of cheap $5 to $10 glue gun will work fine too. You'll need some way to cut the Coro so that it can be cut into strips using a ruler. Any kind of straight, long object, preferably metal, will work. This is a T-square, but any kind will do. And if you are going to be building RGB Coro stars, as opposed to mini light Coro stars, you probably will be using a soldering iron, some solder, and ideally you can also use heat shrink tubing, but of course hot glue will work also. Now, if you're using mini light versions of the CoroFlake, you will just use regular mini lights. Now, if you're using RGB versions, you will need some sort of light or LED module, RGB module, and we'll cover those later. Okay, when you first get your package, it will come and it will be packed with staples along the edges on both sides and a strip of tape up the center. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and just remove the tape. Now, also on your CoroFlakes, you will have an invoice that shows what's in this box. If you have ordered DMX controllers or a Coro claw, it will be located inside the box and be noted at the top. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take our pliers or dikes, and I'm just going to grab these staples and pull them out. Now, we don't have to worry too much about damaging the end because we will not be using the last little bit of Coro. Now, if you have Coro that you receive, and because this package will be used as part of your project, if it's dirty or messed up in some way, don't worry. Just clean it off with some rubbing alcohol or mild water and soap. And you can clean it up. Now, if there's even damaged sections, there's 3 times more Coro here required for your project than is necessary. So you have plenty of extra to allow you to get around any kind of damaged portions. Okay, I'm almost done here removing the staples. Last 4 here. Okay, now go ahead and open up our CoroFlake. Now, inside the box, you're going to find these 2 supports at the ends. Those are just used for spacing and box closure. You can toss those. In here, you'll find instructions that explain how to assemble this as a companion to your video. You'll find the CoroFlake top, and you'll find the CoroFlake base. Okay, First, what we're going to do is go ahead and set these two portions aside. And we're going to first cut the strips necessary for making the vertical portions of the CoroFlake. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my T-square. Again, you can use any kind of ruler. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be lining it up along these holes. Now, I've got it lined out so that the flute of the Coro is going perpendicular to me. It's going horizontal. And also along that same horizontal line are 4 sets of holes. Each one of these sets of holes is an alignment hole, and those help you determine where to cut the vertical sections. So, what you're going to be doing, once you've got it laid out, just put your ruler, mark across, make sure that they're lined up so that the hole is in the center of the ruler. And then I'm just going to take my sharp utility knife, and I'm just going to go ahead and make a very nice cut. Being very careful to make sure that this doesn't move as I turn it, as I cut it. And this should result in a nice clean cut that's straight. I'm going to move down to the next one. And I'm going to again line this up. Now, when you're cutting this, keep in mind the surface that you'll be cutting on top of. Use a surface, in this particular case I have a metal table, but you could use plywood, you can use concrete. It's not ideal, but you could use concrete, masonite, anything that is going to absorb the cut from below, because we are making full cuts all the way through the Coro. Now, should you make a mistake, and in this particular case I have cut slightly off the center, the other ones are aligned, I actually may want to go ahead and just keep just a portion of this. So what I'll do is I'll just cut that out and throw this aside. This portion is fine, the other portion is not. Again, that's fine. You could make a lot of mistakes here and still be just fine. So again, just going to line this up along all of these holes. Make sure that they're in the center. Now, you may think, oh, well, it's got holes. Well, when we're gluing these little notches in the corner, they're going to be fine. You're going to be able to put glue right over the top of them. You'll never see them. Okay, just make another cut through here. Okay, now, if you manage to cut straight on the majority of these, you only probably need to do about 1/3 of the sheet. You can always come back and cut more, or you could cut them all at the same time. Again, because there are 3 times more area of Coro necessary to your project. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set these up here. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and roughly see. They all look pretty even with one another. They're not going to be absolutely perfect, but it doesn't need to be perfect. And so those all look good. Now, any sections, like for example, here we have part of the label left over. That's not a problem. What we'll do is just go through, cut that out. We'll be able to use this for a variety of the different sections. Okay, now, once we have our different sections cut, now also by the way, you'll leave the last piece. Now actually I missed cutting this last section, but you can toss the edge away. That's no longer necessary. Okay, now, once we've got our sections cut out, what we'll do is we'll look in the assembly manual, and you will notice that there are consistent links within each arm of the CoroFlake. So, let me pull out a clean one here. So, within this particular CoroFlake, there are consistent links. So, this side and this side are mirror images, this side and this side are mirror images, and these sides are mirror images, as are these. So, we'll be able to cut those sections together. So what we'll do here, we'll take our tape measure, and using our instructions, which have each section listed, So we have a 10-inch section, 11 3/4 inch section, a 9 7/8 section, a 6-inch section, and a 4-inch section. So what you'll do, you'll notice that there are bins that were put in when the box was made. You can leave those out. So what we'll do is we'll figure out, okay, we need 11 3/4. So you can see that we have 12 inches here, more than 12 inches right here. So we need 11 3/4 section. I'm going to go ahead and just put my tape measure up against there, and we need, again, 11 3/4. So I'm just going to go ahead and find roughly where 11 3/4 are. And I'm just going to put the coral claw so that this claw is on the other side, or the tine, and this center claw is going to cut out this whole piece of coral. It's going to make a nice, clean, even cut along the length of the coral. Now you can see that I have left out the section that I don't need. Now, when I need to make another one of these, I just take my existing one because I've measured it already, and you just use it as a template, and you go over here and you cut the next one. And there you go. Now, you could cut all of these at once, or you can do them one section at a time. You could cut one arm of the CoroFlake and just give it a try to make sure you've got your distances correct. Or you could cut them all at once. Now we have measured them and tested them so that the lengths, if you appropriately cut them, should be just fine. I'm going to demonstrate how to attach this section of the finger on the CoroFlake. I'm going to take my appropriately cut 12-inch section here. I'm just going to lay it up against here. Now, this end's already a little long. It comes past the corner, and that's fine. We'll go ahead and fix that once we're all done gluing everything up. So I'm going to butt up against this edge right here, like that. So what I want to first do is figure out where this curve starts happening. So I kind of come over here and I just eyeball it, and I say, okay, it's coming in right there. I'm going to take my coral claw, put it in there, and I'm just going to cut one section. So you can see that it'll start curving right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to cut 21, which is I know about how many cuts it requires around the outside of this. So I'm going to take this and just 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Now if you overcut too many, that's fine. That just means that that section where it's flat will have a cut in it, but no major deal. Okay, so go ahead and just test fit. Looks like it makes a good bend around the entire curved area here. So now I'm going to take my glue gun. Now you can either attach it to the bottom of the vertical section first, or you can glue to the face of the Coro first. Now for the single non-curved sections, actually I glue to the bottom of this vertical section first, stick it on there. Now for the curved sections, it's a little trickier, and I generally prefer to just go ahead and put it on the face. It ends up a little bit more goo left over, but that's not generally visible. So I'm just going to go ahead, put a bead right around here, stop at the corner. Now, how long you want to wait, sometimes you want to let it set up for a second. And what you could do is if you have a adjustable temperature glue gun, if you set the temperature lower, that allows you a slower work time, so you don't end up having to hold it as long. Now I'm just going to go ahead, stick it roughly in place. Then I'm going to go back and align it, make sure we've got everything just right. And it's already starting to stick up. Now what I'm going to do, wet my finger. And I'm actually just going to take along the side and push that glue into the side. That'll kind of align it, and it actually cools it off fairly quickly, which causes it to set up. Okay, so I've got that one. I'll go back, do the next one here. So again, I take this section, figure out where my curve is going to start. I take and we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And we're 21 for just good measure. All right. Now, if you have a really hot glue gun and it's not adjustable for temperature, you may even want to put the glue down before you start cutting to give it a little bit more time to set up. Okay, put down my glue. Go ahead, set this in place roughly here. Right. Now that one's really long. I don't know if I just measured wrong or grabbed the wrong pieces here, but all right, not a problem. Go ahead and put that in. Going to those then set up. All right, now once I have put up all the different sections, what I want to do is I have different sections that are tied to the face of the coral but not to each other. So they need a little bit more structural strength and to ensure that they're not disconnected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just take my glue gun and right where they come together in this corner here, I'm just going to put some glue in there. Put some glue over here. Make sure that they're reasonably straight. And in this case here, I need to give it a bit of a hold. Now, if your sections are not perfectly flat, that's fine. There's nothing that glue when we attach this entire face down to the base won't fix. So it's not a major deal. Now, I'm going to show you an alternative method of attaching or cutting the Coro. Now, I have been cutting these so that the cut is on the outside. Now, this creates a little striped or vertical shutter effect to it, and you may not like that. And it may be practical because if you live in certain environments that have water that seep into areas, because there is a small area here, water could end up in here, and that's not a problem. The Coro is fine with the water. It then would freeze, and you can have problems where maybe this whole thing becomes too heavy. So, what you could do also, as an alternative, what I'm going to do here is do this section like that. I'm going to go over here, figure out where my section starts. Now, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and do all my regular cuts. So in this case, I'm going to do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Okay, now, I could, of course, use this piece just like I was doing in the previous sample. Now, that then leaves the cuts on the outside here. I can flip it around, but of course, if I flip it around, what I need to do to get a nice clean curve, ideally, now you can see here that I can do this, and if I put more cuts in there and that creates a little overlapping, that will create kind of a darker spot along the edge of the CoroFlake. Alternatively, what you can do is come back, bend it, and we cut out these little T's. So you just take your Coro claw again, and just cut off the lip of that. So just do like that. Now you can cut off each one, or even better, save yourself some time, just cut off every other one. That creates enough spacing for the curve to gently curve on the inside of that. So now you can see I've done it with all of them missing, and then I've done it with some of them missing. So whenever I curve it, you can see that it maintains more structural area, so I don't end up with real flimsy sides that I can't really glue well to. So it creates a little bit more surface area. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and put my glue down. Now you may get these little pieces of glue like this, the little tiny strings of glue. Don't worry about them. You can clean them up after you're done. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, which side is which, I'm just going to go ahead, take this, just like I did with the others, stick it on here, line it up. And there we go, a little bit more both. This up there. And there we go. So that shows you how to glue on each one of the fingers. You can see that's fairly quick and easy after you've done and pre-cut your sections as needed. You just then again go around the entire edge again and you're done. Now once you've glued those sections as I showed you before, and let's say you've got a little bit sticking over here, in this case I've got a little bit sticking off the edge. In truth, it really makes no difference, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and take a sharp utility knife. I'm just going to cut down, being careful here, and cut off that extra section. Okay, now we're ready to determine where we're going to be putting our lights. But to do that, we need to transfer the outline of the top of the CoroFlake onto the base, so we'll know exactly where all the lights are going to be placed. So, now that we have our completed top, we're going to determine which is the top and the bottom of this CoroFlake. Now the top is designated by the most inner set string reliefs. You can see that the others are at the bottom in the outside corner. Also, you'll notice that there are several string relief cord holders right here at the base of the CoroFlake. Now, which is front and back? It actually doesn't really matter. You can put them this way. You can put them so that the cut is on the other side. I put mine so that the smooth face without the cut is on the front, but it really makes no difference. Okay, now what we're going to do is take our CoroFlake. Now, let's go ahead and clock this so that it's the direction you want. Now, the several schools of thought here, you'll notice that there's a vertical line. The Coro is going, in this particular case, top to bottom. That does allow any moisture that it gets in here to gravitate down, because if you do put it sideways, it could a little bit more seep in. So I'm just going to go ahead and set mine so that it's vertical. Now, how I'm going to know if it's in the center is by looking at these 10 holes that are in the center of the CoroFlake. Now, this big hole is for the wires, and then this is one arm, and this is one arm, and that's one arm. So that corresponds to each one of these these arms, as they come into the center. So I'm just going to simply place that on top till I can't see my holes, so that they're all under there. Just give it a look. Looks like it's pretty well centered, so that it's even all the way around. Okay, now what I'm going to do, in this particular case, I'm going to use a mechanical pencil, but you can use a pen, any kind of writing instrument, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead. This doesn't have to be done really heavily. This is just really a guideline for us. I'm just going to go ahead, mark around the edge. The pencil is good because it does stand out as being gray on the black. So if you use a black marker, it sometimes can be a little harder to see the black marker. So we're just going to come around. Mark each one of these arms. keep it from sliding around in here so that it doesn't roll around. Again, this doesn't have to be absolutely exact, because when we go to glue this onto the Coro, its absolute placement is really not that important. And it's black, so you shouldn't see it in your display anyway. So even if it were off, grossly off, it really wouldn't matter. Okay, almost there. Okay. All right. Now I remove my CoroFlake top that we've built, and you should be able to see now that there are lines that show us the intersecting points right here in the center where our CoroFlake is going to be placed. Okay. Now that we've traced the outline of the top onto the base, we can go ahead and determine how we're going to be laying out our lighting. Now, if you have a mini light edition of the CoroFlake, there will be holes located all throughout the arm. There will be 100 lights in this section, 100 in the center, and then of course 100 in each one around the outside for a total of 600. And you'll just insert the mini lights through the bottom up through the top. And you can then of course set them up on a single controller, and that would consume 6 channels for each individual CoroFlake. Now, if you're going RGB, you have a lot of different options here. There is no one particular best option for you. It really depends upon the particular needs you have, your budget, and the look that you're going for. Now, if you're not familiar with any of the terminology I'm about to use, go ahead and refer to our website. We have a great training series called the RGB Basics. It's at holidaycoro.com/RGB. Now, within RGB, you have 2 basic versions of RGB you can do. You can use basic RGB, and that is where all the LEDs are connected to a controller. In this case, we have a 3-channel controller that would then control the signal for all of these entire LED RGB strings as one string. And we would put that one string generally in one arm of the CoroFlake, and that allows us to control each individual arm. Or we could even do it so that we could control the entire CoroFlake. Now, there's another option. So those are basic, and here are smart strings. These are smart string modules. They're 1804s, and these can be each individually controlled. So what I would be able to do is, instead of just being able to control the entire arm, I could control each individual module within the arm. So what that allows us to do is to do some interesting starburst effects. For example, I can make it go here, inward, then this one, then this one, then this one, and then pop out the side. So you can do some really interesting things with modules inside the CoroFlake. Now, of course, if you're going to be using pixels for your lighting, you will need to keep in mind your addressing scheme and how you'll be addressing these. You know, because if I run this signal in here, it's going to be first address, second address, third address, fourth address, and then maybe we want it to come out here. So keep in mind the way you're physically laying it out and how that's going to correspond to your addressing within your controller. Now, there are 2 basic types of modules. I've got a rectangular type here. This rectangular type comes in a variety of different lengths and widths. Usually they have 3 50-50 LEDs. The spacing between them varies. The longer spacing you can get between them, the better. Now, here's square modules. These also have 3 50-50 LEDs in them. These generally tend to be easier to place inside the CoroFlake because they're not long and they can bend easier. What you want to do, start off, just do some rough outline and stay within obviously the boundary of where you've marked, plus a little extra. So just lay them out and place them. And once you have a rough approximation, what I would recommend is just lightly gluing them in. Just take a little hot glue, put it on the back, stick it down, and then what you want to do is just take your top of your CoroFlake, not gluing it on, just temporarily put it on the top, hook up, of course, obviously your controllers to test in the power, and just turn off the lights and get an idea of what it looks like. Does it have enough lights? Does it not have enough lights? So you can get an idea of what it looks like before you start adhering all of your LEDs down. Generally speaking, I have used 9 LED modules, and they are more than bright enough for viewing up to several hundred feet away. So even this arrangement right here, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, would be more than bright enough. And these types of basic RGB modules are usually less than about 70 cents, sometimes 50 cents. So not very expensive at all. Okay. Controllers. You obviously need to be able to control your LEDs, and as I mentioned before, we do sell a very good controller. This is a DMX module controller. It can come pre-programmed with DMX addresses already ready to go. It has a DMX signal in, power in for 12 volts, and then the 4 wires for hooking up RGB lights. Now, this was designed for these, and it can accommodate you in between each one of these groups of lights putting a controller. That will allow you to mount the controller inside the CoroFlake. Now, the caveat you need to be aware of with the controller that you choose to use, if you're using a controller that does not have addressable settings that you can do without opening the box, you're going to have to mount the control on the back side where it's accessible. These controllers can be programmed over the wire, just using a standard programmer that is available. So that means that I don't have to, even if this is a sealed unit now, be able to go back in and change the address. I can just simply attach it to the wires on the back side and then address it. Okay. If you're going to be mounting them, obviously keep in mind where you're going to mount them and how you're going to mount them. If you're going to mount them on the back, of course, make sure that you have appropriate spacing if you're going to be mounting things on the back. And one last suggestion here is that if you will be using RGB components, because this top will be basically sealed on top of the base, that limits your access. So what I would recommend is running them for a week to 2 weeks, just to make sure. Now, if you've purchased good quality RGB components and controllers, now these modules we've not had failures with, but I have seen some failures with RGB lights in the past. So I recommend running them for about a week or 2. These controllers have a built-in sequence. You can just apply power to them and they'll start rolling through the different colors. All right, now you've got your RGB lights all mounted to your base and you're ready to attach the top to it. Now, before you do that, I'm going to give a couple of suggestions based on experiences from my prior season with the CoroFlake. Now, what we have here is we have a completed CoroFlake. He has been out in the weather all last season. Fared pretty well. This was originally just a prototype unit. Now, several things I'd like to recommend that you do. First is, you'll note that I've got the power supply. This is an RGB power supply. It's a 45 watt power supply, and it's more than enough power to power this whole CoroStar. You can see that I've just got it mounted on there. I've got regular SPT2 cord just wired into here. You can see I've got some shrink wrap attaching this power supply. And I've got a Cat5 cable that supplies signal to this whole CoroStar. So this is an entire single unit. It's all self-contained. So I'm able to just plug this into the nearest controller right here. You can see that I've got it even labeled left snowflake on this particular house. And I just plug in power and it's ready to go. So it's very easy to mount Keep that in mind maybe when you're considering your design. Don't forget that the top sections, these are the holes that are for the top of the CoroFlake. Now, also, I recommend if you've got your controllers mounted inside, first what I would recommend is running your CoroFlake before you glue the top on, because it is a little bit hard to get it back off once it is glued on. I would recommend running your CoroFlake in burn-in for a week or two. Just let it run. Run through sequences. If you've got these DMX controllers here, they have a built-in sequence that rolls through the different colors. There have been experiences I've had where LED modules go bad. So you'd rather make sure that they're all good beforehand. Now, if you run them a week or two, you're more than likely not going to have any problems after that. Now, if you should ever want to readdress your show, or your CoroFlake, you'll notice here that I've got numbers for the addresses on each controller because I can't see inside of there. So I have labeled each one of these so I know which controller is which. So if I do need to come back, I can split this open and reprogram this whole unit. One other caveat to be aware of, don't program these modules all the way up to 512. Only go to 509. 512 will cause you problems. You can see that I have then spliced all of these individual controller DMX signals into one Cat5 cable. I've just shrink wrapped it. Nothing special here. It doesn't have to be perfectly watertight. And I've also done the same with the power here. Now that I have inserted a little bit of hot glue to seal up this whole unit to make it a nice sealed unit. Okay. Now, you'll note that there are some holes here for mounting along the top your power supply or your cable. These are just strain reliefs so that it doesn't pull on the individual cables. So use some zip ties for that. Now, once you're ready and you've been through testing and you're sure it's all working, remember that you want to get it oriented in a way such that the Coro hopefully is vertically located so that the flutes are going vertical so that the water will come out if necessary. Now, what you'll do is set it on, and because you'll be able to lift up each individual leg, let me put on the unfinished CoroFlake. So here we have our unfinished CoroFlake along with our top. So what I'll do, put that on top there. Now, you'll be able to lift up each individual leg individually. And so what you'll do is you'll just go through, put some glue on here. If you're worried that you might want to get it open in the future, just put a couple of dabs on there. It doesn't have to be completely watertight. It's not going to be completely watertight. Just put some dabs here and there and this and there, and it'll be strong enough when all of those arms are glued. So again, you don't have to glue down every single area around the outside like you did when you actually made the top here. Just make sure that you got all your wires in your holes and glue down and you're done.